thrown out by my family over lies. They came crawling back when I made it big. I was 17, just a few months shy of graduating high school. My brother, Ryan, was 2 years older than me. He was a golden child, charming, athletic, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Me, I was the quiet one, the straight-A student who worked part-time after school to save for college. I didn't need much from my parents, and they were happy to leave me in the background while Ryan soaked up all the attention. But Ryan wasn't as perfect as he pretended to be. He partied a lot, had a knack for getting into trouble, and wasn't exactly honest. I'd caught him sneaking cash from Mom's purse once and overheard him lying to Dad about skipping classes, but I kept my mouth shut. I figured it wasn't my business. That changed when Ryan decided to make me a scapegoat. It started with whispers. One day, my parents sat me down in the living room. Their faces were stern, and I could tell something was wrong. "Do you have something to tell us?" Mom asked, her arms crossed. "About what?" I said, confused. "Don't play dumb," Dad snapped. "Ryan told us everything." "Everything about what?" I asked, my heart starting to race. "That you've been stealing money from the family," Mom said, "and using it to buy drugs." I stared at them, stunned. "What? That's not true." "Don't lie to us," Dad said. "Ryan caught you in the act. He even found the receipts." Receipts? I didn't even know what they were talking about. But no matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. "It makes sense now," Mom said, shaking her head. "Why you've been working so many hours? You've been hiding something." "I'm saving for college," I yelled. "Check my bank account if you don't believe me." But they wouldn't. Ryan had them wrapped around his finger, and they took his word over mine without question. The next week was hell. They treated me like a criminal in my own home, watching my every move and accusing me of lying whenever I tried to defend myself. Ryan, of course, played the victim, acting like he was just trying to help the family by exposing me. I stopped eating meals with them, stopped talking to them unless I had to. I didn't feel safe in my own house anymore. Then one night, it all came to a head. I came home from my shift at the diner to find my things packed in boxes by the front door. "What's this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "We've had enough," Dad said. "You're out. Out," I repeated, my throat tightening. "You're kicking me out?" "You're a bad influence on this family," Mom said, her voice cold. "We can't have you here anymore. Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. "That's not our problem," Dad said. "You made your choices. Now deal with the consequences." Ryan stood in the corner, smirking. He didn't say a word, but the look on his face said it all. I won. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have anywhere to go. I grabbed my boxes and walked out into the night, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. I had no idea how I was going to survive, but one thing was clear. I couldn't rely on my family anymore. I spent the first night sleeping in my car. It wasn't comfortable, but it was all I had. The boxes of my stuff were crammed into the back seat, and I curled up in the front, using my jacket as a blanket. I had about $300 saved from my part-time job. Not much, but enough to keep me afloat for a week or two. I didn't have any close friends I could stay with. Ryan's lies had spread to my classmates too, and I didn't want to deal with their judgment. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. My manager, Maria, could tell something was off. "You look like hell," she said bluntly as I tied my apron. "Didn't get much sleep," I replied, hoping she'd drop it. But Maria wasn't the type to ignore things. She pulled me aside during my break and made me spill everything. When I finished, she sighed and handed me a sandwich. "Eat this," she said, "and you can crash on my couch for a few nights." Maria's couch wasn't exactly luxury living, but it was a step up from my car. She didn't ask for details, didn't press me to talk more than I wanted to. She just gave me a place to sleep and reminded me to take things one day at a time. I spent the next few weeks looking for a cheap room to rent. Most places were way out of my price range, but eventually I found a tiny studio apartment that was barely more than a closet. The walls were thin and the plumbing made weird noises, but it was mine. I worked double shifts at the diner to make ends meet. Between rent, groceries, and gas, I had nothing left by the end of each month. But at least I was surviving. One night, about 3 months after I moved out, I was cleaning up after closing when Maria came over with a newspaper in her hand. "Look at this," she said, slapping it onto the counter. It was an article about a high school party that had been busted by the cops. There was a list of names mentioned, and Ryan's was right there at the top. "Isn't this your brother?" Maria asked. I stared at the article, my stomach twisting. "Yeah, that's him. Looks like he's the one with the drug problem," Maria said, raising an eyebrow. The article said Ryan had been caught with a bag of pills at the party. He'd tried to claim they weren't his, but several witnesses said otherwise. I felt a mix of vindication and anger. So this was the guy my parents had believed over me? The one they'd chosen to protect while throwing me out? I thought about calling them, rubbing their faces in the truth. But I didn't. I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd find some way to excuse Ryan's behavior, just like they always did. Instead, I threw myself into work. I saved every spare penny, slowly building up a small emergency fund. When I wasn't working, I spent my time studying for the GED. College had always been my goal, and I wasn't going to let Ryan or my parents take that away from me. 2 years later, I was enrolled in community college, working toward a business degree. I'd also gotten a promotion at the diner. Maria made me an assistant manager, which meant more hours and better pay. Life wasn't perfect, but it was finally starting to feel stable. I didn't need my family anymore, and I was proud of that. Then, out of nowhere, my parents showed up at the diner. It was a quiet afternoon, and I was wiping down tables when I saw them walk in. My stomach dropped. "Hi, Grace," Mom said, smiling like nothing had happened. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "We wanted to see how you were doing," Dad said. "It's been so long." I couldn't believe the audacity. "You kicked me out," I said, crossing my arms. "What makes you think I'd want to see you?" Mom's smile faltered. "We know we made mistakes," she said, "but we've missed you." "Missed me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't miss me when you believed Ryan's lies and threw me out like trash." Dad frowned. "We didn't have all the facts back then. If we'd known." "You didn't want to know," I interrupted. "You didn't even bother to listen to me. You just took his side." The conversation was going nowhere, so I turned to leave. But before I could walk away, Dad grabbed my arm. "Wait," he said. "There's something else we need to talk about." I shook him off. "What?" "It's about Ryan," Mom said, looking uncomfortable. "What about him?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "He's struggling," Dad said. "He's in a lot of debt. We're trying to help him, but we can't do it alone." I stared at them, dumbfounded. "You're kidding, right? You came here to ask me for money? After everything you did to me?" "We thought you want to help your family," Mom said, her voice trembling. "My family?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You're not my family. You made that clear when you threw me out for something I didn't even do." They kept trying to justify themselves, saying Ryan had made mistakes, but deserved a second chance. I wasn't interested in hearing it. "I don't owe you anything," I said firmly, "and I definitely don't owe him anything. Now get out." They left, looking shocked and hurt, but I didn't care. That night, I sat in my apartment, replaying the conversation in my head. For years, I wanted them to admit they were wrong, to apologize for what they did. But now that they had, it didn't feel like enough. I realized something important that night. I didn't need their validation. I'd built a life for myself without them, and I was stronger because of it. They'd abandoned me when I needed them most. Now it was my turn to leave them behind. After my parents showed up at the diner, I half expected them to come back, maybe with another round of apologies or another excuse for Ryan. But weeks passed, and there was nothing. No calls, no surprise visits. I thought I was fine with it. I didn't need them in my life, but the whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. The truth? Their visit had brought back everything I'd worked so hard to forget. The night they kicked me out, the humiliation of being cast aside, the years of struggling to rebuild my life from nothing. And now, they wanted me to help Ryan? It was laughable. Life went on. I kept working at the diner while finishing my degree. Maria, my manager, became like a second mom to me. She pushed me to think bigger, even when I doubted myself. "You're smart, Grace," she said one day after work. "You've got a good head for business. You could run your own place someday." I laughed it off at first, but the idea stuck with me. A few months later, I graduated with my degree. Maria threw me a little party at the diner, complete with balloons and a cake. It was the first time in years I'd felt truly celebrated. That same year, I got my first big break. A customer at the diner, a regular named Tom, had overheard me talking about my dreams of starting a business. He handed me his card and told me to call him if I ever wanted advice. Tom owned a string of local cafes, and after a few conversations, he offered me a position as a manager at one of his locations. It paid more than I'd ever made at the diner, and it felt like a huge step forward. Within a year, I'd proven myself. Tom promoted me to regional manager, giving me oversight of multiple locations. The pay increase was life-changing. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I moved into a bigger apartment, upgraded my beat-up car, and started saving for the future. I was proud of what I'd accomplished, and I didn't owe any of it to my family. Then one day, I got a call that changed everything. It was from a distant relative I hadn't spoken to in years. "Grace," she said, her voice hesitant. "I don't know if you've heard, but Ryan's in trouble." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of trouble?" She sighed. "He got caught stealing from his job. They fired him, and now he's facing charges. Your parents are trying to help him, but they're struggling." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to feel vindicated, to laugh and say he deserved it. But all I felt was a weird mix of anger and pity. "I thought you should know," she said. "They might reach out to you again." I thanked her for the heads up and hung up, unsure what to do with the information. Sure enough, my parents called a few days later. "Grace," Mom said, her voice strained. "We need to talk." "What do you want?" I asked, already annoyed. "It's about Ryan," she said. "He's in a bad place. He could really use your help right now." "I'm sure he could," I said dryly. Mom sighed. "Grace, please. He's your brother." "No, he's your son," I snapped. "And he's the reason you threw me out of the house. Remember that." "Of course I remember," she said quietly. "And I regret it every day." "That's nice," I said. "But regret doesn't erase what you did." "Grace," she pleaded. "He's going to jail if we don't help him. We've already spent everything we have on lawyers. We're out of options." "That sounds like a you problem," I said. There was a long pause. Then she said, "You've done so well for yourself. We're proud of you, Grace. But Ryan..." "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't try to guilt me into fixing his mess. I'm not his safety net. I'm not yours either." "Grace, please," she said again. "We're not asking for much. Just enough to cover the rest of his legal fees." I laughed bitterly. "You want my money? After you kicked me out with nothing? After you believed his lies over me? Unbelievable." "We were wrong," she admitted. "We see that now. But you've always been so strong, Grace. You've moved on, built a life for yourself. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive us?" I almost hung up right then, but something stopped me. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, "This isn't about forgiveness. It's about accountability. You abandoned me when I needed you the most. Now you're reaping the consequences of the choices you made. Grace, she started, but I cut her off. I'm done, I said firmly. I don't owe you anything. Not my money, not my time, and definitely not my forgiveness. With that, I hung up. That night, I sat in my apartment, trying to sort through my feelings. Part of me felt satisfied, like I'd finally taken control of the narrative. But another part of me felt empty, no matter how much I succeeded. A small part of me still craved the family I never really had. But I knew they'd never change. Their love had always been conditional, tied to Ryan's lies and their perception of me, and I wasn't going to waste another second chasing it. After I hung up on my mom, I thought that was the end of it. I'd said my piece, drawn my boundaries, and made it clear that I wasn't going to be their safety net. But they weren't done. 2 weeks later, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find them standing there, looking exhausted and desperate. "Grace, we need to talk," Dad said. "No," I replied, already shutting the door. He stuck his foot in the way. "Please, just hear us out." I sighed, my anger simmering just under the surface. "You've got 5 minutes." They stepped inside, looking around like they couldn't believe how nice my place was. It wasn't a mansion or anything, but it was clean, modern, and a far cry from the tiny studio I'd started with. "You've done well for yourself," Mom said, her voice soft. "Yeah," I said, crossing my arms. "Without any help from you." She winced, but Dad cut in. "Grace, we know we messed up. We've admitted that. But Ryan, he's in real trouble. If he goes to jail, it'll ruin his life. Maybe he should have thought about that before stealing," I said coldly. "He made a mistake," Dad said. "But he's still your brother." "No, he's not," I replied. "He's the reason I spent years scraping by, sleeping on couches, and wondering if I'd ever get my life back on track. He's the reason you kicked me out. He's not my brother. He's a stranger." Mom started crying, but I didn't feel bad. "We were wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "We let Ryan manipulate us, and we took everything out on you. But he's still family. You can't just turn your back on him." "Family?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. Where was my family when I was sleeping in my car? Where was my family when I had nothing, because you believed Ryan's lies over me? "We didn't know," Dad said, his voice low. "No, you didn't want to know," I shot back. "You didn't care enough to ask, to listen, to see what was right in front of you. And now that your golden child is in trouble, you want me to clean up the mess." They stood there, silent. For the first time, I saw shame on their faces. "I'm not helping Ryan," I said firmly. "I built my life without him, without you, and I'm not going to let you drag me back into his chaos." "Grace," Mom said, wiping her tears, "we've already lost so much. We don't want to lose you too." "You already did," I replied. "You lost me the day you threw me out. And you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to see that I didn't need you. I never did." Dad tried a different angle. "What about us?" he asked. "We're your parents. Don't you want to fix things?" I stared at him, my anger slowly giving way to exhaustion. "Fix things?" I said. "You think throwing some apologies at me fixes what you did? You think I can just forget the years I spent fighting to survive because you didn't believe in me? Because you abandoned me?" They didn't have an answer. "I'll tell you what," I said, stepping closer. "You want to fix things? Start by admitting you failed me. Not just to me, but to yourselves. Admit that you made a choice, Ryan over me, and that choice has consequences. And then leave me alone. For good." Mom shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "We don't want to lose you," she repeated. "You already did," I said again, my voice firm. They didn't argue. They didn't beg. They just stood there, realizing they'd already lost a fight. When they finally left, I sat down on the couch, letting out a shaky breath. For years, I dreamed of this moment, of finally confronting them, of making them understand the damage they'd done. And now that it had happened, I felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just a hollow emptiness where my family should have been. But then I thought about the life I'd built without them. The friends who'd supported me, the mentors who believed in me, the career I'd worked so hard to create. I realized I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their apologies. I was free. A few months later, I got a promotion, regional director for the cafe chain. It was the biggest step in my career, and for the first time, I felt like I'd truly made it. I didn't invite my parents to the celebration. Instead, I surrounded myself with the people who mattered. Maria, my co-workers, my friends, the people who had been there when no one else was. Looking back, I don't regret cutting my parents out of my life. They made their choice, and I made mine. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about the people who show up for you, who believe in you, who stand by you when it counts. My parents and Ryan will always be part of my story, but they don't define it. I define it. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.